And welcome on in, everybody. Another edition here of the Auburn Undercover podcast. Welcome to Thursday Night Live. We are live here inside of Neville Arena. Not live when you'll be watching this, a little bit earlier in the day. Just got done talking to Bruce Pearl as Auburn gets set to go on the road to play number 23 Georgia on Saturday. Jason and I are going to get into a little bit of Bruce's comments, but before that, we'll cut away to an interview with Dawgs 24/7 from earlier today. Our buddy Jordan Hill was kind enough to join us and give us some insight from the Georgia side of things, so we'll cut to that interview now. And we're glad to welcome on in here today a constant guest here at the Auburn Undercover podcast. We're glad to have Jordan Hill from Dawgs 24/7, an old friend of the Auburn beat. Always glad for him to be back on the show. Jordan, I know you're making the rounds. Georgia and Auburn, any sport, making the rounds on the Auburn podcasts and the Q&As and all that stuff. But shoot, usually when it's ranked versus ranked, and usually when there's a lot of anticipation, it's football. But goodness, what a basketball game we've got on hand for Saturday.
Yeah, Nathan, I think it's going to be a highly anticipated one for Georgia fans, and I couldn't really tell you the last time that was the case. You know, that they've done such a great job to this point in the season, 14-3. There's a lot of excitement, and I think fans and the team alike understand it's not going to be easy against Auburn, even with Janai Broome probably not playing. But I think people are excited, and I think for good reason.
Talk a little bit about just kind of the overview, I guess the bite-sized impressions of this Georgia team for those not looking at their schedule. I mean, you and I talked about it before we got rolling, Jordan. The teams they have lost to three genuinely terrific teams, and those are their only losses. They lost to Marquette. That's a top 10 team in the country right now. Ole Miss is one of only two undefeated teams in the SEC. Wednesday got spanked a little bit in Knoxville, but that's going to happen sometimes. They're really not going to knock you for a loss like that. Talk about what Georgia has done so far this season to put themselves in position as a tournament contender.
I think we should have taken what Mike White was telling us in the preseason to heart, but he was very adamant, oh, we're going to be good this year. Like he had said that a few times. He was not shy about that. And I think it boils down to, one, they did a good job of keeping three key pieces from last year in Silas Demery Jr., Blue Kane, and Dylan James. Now, it's Silas and Blue that are the starters. Dylan's kind of coming in off the bench occasionally. But getting those guys, getting that backcourt and keeping Silas and Blue, and then adding to it specifically with size. You go get a five-star in Asa Newell. You go get a veteran in R.J. Godfrey. Santos Surreal has been really, when he's had big games, it has been undeniable what his potential is. He's a freshman that originally was going to sign with Kentucky, and John Calipari leaves for Arkansas. Samto opens it back up. He winds up at Georgia. But yeah, I mean, they've done a really good job of retooling this roster, and the strengths of even the last few Mike White teams that weren't as good was defense first. I mean, they would play great defense. They would be in games last year. They pushed number 4 Tennessee to the wire, and Dalton Connect decided he was going to do Dalton Connect things and just kind of took that game over, and Tennessee won it. But they finally have a semblance of shooting and an ability to score that they've just lacked the last few years. And the games where they have lost at this point, and you saw it against Tennessee on Wednesday, they have struggled a bit shooting the ball. But they're definitely much more consistent in that area. They can beat and bang with the best of them. And that's what, part of what interests me about this game against Auburn is how do they compete with a team that's got that kind of size, even when you don't have Janai Broome in the picture. Can they hang, especially on their home court? I think they've got the talent to make it interesting, but they've got to put it together. They got to play cleaner basketball. They had 19 turnovers in that loss to Tennessee. And, if there were two knocks, it would be inconsistent shooting, especially from three, and then turnovers. Even in the games they've won, turnovers have been a bit of an issue.
Yeah, you mentioned the defense being a kind of a pillar for Mike White. Number 17 in Ken Palm right now in defensive efficiency. I mean, you look at the numbers across the board. This is the number 9 3-point defense in the country for Georgia, number 35 in 2-point defense. They block a lot of shots. Really, really impressive. So I guess we'll just kind of ride that wave and talk about what you think of their interior presence, because Auburn's game plan doesn't necessarily change that much without Janai Broome. Like, they still like to go inside out, but obviously you miss a guy like that. Didn't really matter. They ended up shooting the ball so well against Mississippi State. Like, they had a season low in assists without Janai, who does a really good job facilitating the offense. But like, they just ended up playing so well. I can't see that being the case on Saturday if they only have 9 assists in this game. Do you expect Georgia to try to attack the interior without the shot blocker Broome? What do you see from that front court matchup? Because Auburn's got some physical guys, but obviously nobody who can produce like Broome.
I think that's going to be in their best interest again, just because they've been so spotty, especially from 3-point range. Really, that Tennessee loss was one of their better 3-point showings in the last few games. And Silas Demery Jr. did a really good job shooting from three. Dakota LaFue's been their best 3-point shooter to this point. But no, I think it's in their best interest to let Asa Newell go to work to really challenge those guys down low. And it's been really interesting. He's a guy that's talked about as a lottery pick. And I mean, I think he's been fantastic. But it's been a while since we've seen a game where basically it was like, get Asa the ball and everybody move out of the way, which obviously everybody understands. He's the best player on Georgia's team. They are game planning to try to stop Asa. But he does this, it's one of the greater compliments I think you can give, especially a younger player, where, you see him making plays. You're not really watching the stats. And then you look and you go, oh, it's halftime. He's got 15 points and 8 boards. Like, he just very quietly does this. I think it's going to be a game where they've really got to lean on Asa to be the go-to guy to really challenge those guys. And some of the impressive wins they've had to this point, I think about last week. I think it was really the Oklahoma game. They attacked down low, and not only did that lead to a lot of points, but it got Oklahoma in foul trouble. Georgia shot a lot of free throws. And going back to Asa, he had 3 different and 1 opportunities that he executed on, getting fouled, going hard to the rim, making the shot, and then hitting a free throw. I think that is in Georgia's best interest to attack that way. And, Asa leads the charge, but I would look to RJ Godfrey, the Clemson transfer, who, I thought early minutes of the Tennessee game did an outstanding job of really pushing Tennessee down low and scoring some points and making it interesting. That's what, when you look, Georgia loses that game. I think it was 74-56 was the final. But, I mean, Georgia led at halftime. Georgia had played great defensively. And then the first probably 7.5 minutes of the second half, it totally got out of hand. But, yeah, I mean, I think if Georgia's going to win on Saturday or even just make it interesting, they got to rely on those bigs. They got to let them go to work. And I throw in Santos Surreal there as well, because he has just been so impactful defensively. Try to get him involved, trying to allow him to play a part. The offense still needs to come with Santo. He's had some tough turnovers. Ball control has been an issue down low for him, but there's no doubting that he is, well on his way to being a very good defensive player. See if he gets involved as well.
Yeah, I'm excited about that matchup between Asa Newell and Chaney Johnson. Two athletic forwards. It's a little bit different. Of course, Asa's a guy who's kind of got that first round talent. Chaney, 5th-year senior, bigger guy, obviously has that experience level, probably a little bit more physical of a player. Really, really excited to watch that. Jordan, I've seen on Twitter you've mentioned it a couple times this season about just Georgia's home court advantage has been really, really good. I know this is a team that, as Mike White has built it, they've looked to that. They've tried to get the student involvement and get that place rocking a little bit more. And they a couple ranked home wins here in SEC play. I think if this game was in Neville Arena, and we were talking about it right now, even without Janai Broome, obviously we'd be having much different conversations. But I mean, it seems like that's been a legitimate factor, and it seems like Georgia, obviously, they've played a lot better at home this season.
Yeah, it's been great. And, I commend the athletic director, Josh Brooks, and the people who were involved with a few years ago, kind of following the blueprint of Auburn and a few other schools in the SEC of moving the student section closer to the court, because it's absolutely had an impact. I think it was after the Oklahoma game, we were talking to Silas Demery, and I asked him about the noise during that game. And he was like, yeah, I was yelling at one point to try to get, some of the teammates' attention. And he said, nobody could hear me just because of the noise. It's been legitimate. I think that the students deserve a lot of credit. I kind of took for granted for that Kentucky game. I usually try to show up about an hour, maybe an hour 10 before the game. And I'm pulling up and there's traffic and there's, students wrapped around Stegman Coliseum. And I'm like, okay, like they really are showing up and showing out for, a team that at that point hadn't really proven itself in SEC play. At that point, had just lost to Ole Miss on the road, and then they go win that game against Kentucky. But the thing I always go to with that crowd, with the environment they bring, that it's kind of the field of dreams thing of if you build it, they will come. I think, especially when you talk about post football season, the fans want to show up and the fans want to follow a winner. Auburn's a great example of that, of just the home court that they built there at Neville. Uh, it's possible at Georgia. You just have to have the consistency and show, the fans that it's worth showing up for. And Mike White and this crew and these players have done that. And I think it's led to a really nice crowd. I will be fascinated to see Saturday what the Auburn split is, because we know Auburn will travel well. I'm sure there's a lot of folks coming up from Atlanta, Auburn fans that'll be there. And I had some friends reach out to me saying, why are tickets so expensive? I said, you can thank the Auburn Tigers and their fans, because I'm sure that's driven up the price a little bit in Stegman.
Yeah, and it's at the end of the day, it's still less expensive than a game in Neville Arena, which is just wild. Yeah, I mean, look, this will be one where Auburn's come to town for Georgia the last few years, and look, Georgia beat them at home a couple years ago. I think that Auburn team was ranked number 12. So that game always is one that will carry a good crowd for Georgia, but more so than that, I mean, this is a good Georgia team. I look at Auburn on this schedule, and it's not just, oh, it's number one Auburn. They're going to be really up for this game. Like, no, this is a fantastic opportunity for Georgia's resume. You and I were talking about their schedule looking forward. I believe they're projected as like a 7 seed right now. You would love, anyone would obviously love to get a really high quad one win like this, but it would do really, really good things for their resume. Talk about what last one here. I guess Jordan, what you see from this SEC schedule moving forward that maybe Georgia has to do to stay in this tournament conversation. If they continue beating ranked teams every once in a while, like they've been doing, obviously that would help a lot. What do you see from their outlook? As again, they're kind of projected, I think, on that 7 or 8 line right now.
Yeah, it's just going to be fascinating, really, to see how this whole thing plays out in the SEC, because it just looks like you're going to see teams just beating up each other these next couple months. I mean, I think about that Ole Miss win at Alabama. I think about Missouri beating Florida. I think the biggest thing for Georgia, and it's very simple, and it goes back to something that Mike White has said in past years, when it became clear that Georgia wasn't going to be an NCAA tournament team, but it's win as much as you can at home and try to steal some on the road. And you get a win like Auburn, much easier said than done, but that would be a huge boost to your resume, especially after beating Kentucky and Oklahoma at home. But you've got to take advantage of some of those road games you have. We were talking, Nathan, before we started recording. They got a game next week at Arkansas. Bud Walton is never an easy place to win, but you are a better team right now than that Arkansas team is. You have to take advantage of those. And the thing that they have got to clean up when it comes to those road games is just their starts to the second half. The way that Tennessee second half started, Tennessee outscored them 26-4. And I don't remember the margin in the Ole Miss game, but it was very similar, where Georgia, was either in the lead at halftime or within, 3 or 4 points. And then Ole Miss just totally took the game over to start the second half. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a situation where, maybe Georgia's teetering around 8 SEC wins, but I think we're looking at an entire conference where it's just like, Nathan, we participate in that SEC poll we do for 24/7 Sports. And I think the further we go into this, there's going to be a lot of these ballots where teams are just all over the place, because you're going to have teams pulling upsets. You're going to have teams beating up on each other. Georgia's just going to have to win the right amount, because, I don't think even the teams that wind up winning this conference or at the top of this conference are going to have really nice, final conference records, just because I think there's going to be a lot of, teams trading wins and and you just try to get as much as you can along the way.
Yeah, something to watch. You mentioned Georgia starts the second half. So if you're an Auburn fan listening, maybe pay attention to that. If Auburn is trailing a little bit, they play really, really well at the starts of second halves. I've done that kind of past couple years. But again, Broome is usually a really big part of that. If he's slow out of the gates, usually they'll draw up some stuff at halftime, get him a couple baskets, and then he's rolling and you can't stop him. Probably not going to have him for this game. So should be a really, really good one. This will be one of the tougher road crowds Auburn's seen so far. I mean, Texas did not appear to have a really good contingent. Auburn pretty much had half the fans at South Carolina. I'm with you. This is really interesting because it's such an easy road game, like drive wise for Auburn fans, but Georgia fans are obviously enjoying a ranked team right now. And so they're going to obviously be really, really up for this one. So should be, a ranked rivalry basketball game between Georgia and Auburn. We can absolutely appreciate this one. So really, really looking forward to it on Saturday. Jordan, thank you so much for joining us today. I guess any final remarks before Saturday's game?
No, looking forward to it. I was going to point out our buddy Justin Ferguson pointed out that the last time these two teams played as ranked teams was 2003. Nathan, what were you doing in 2003?
Shoot, what was the name of the elementary school where I went to kindergarten? It's probably there. It's probably there sometime in mid-January. So sorry for anybody listening. That's what I was doing.
Well, I was in third grade, I'm pretty sure. Shout out Jasper Elementary, the Tigers. Yeah, maybe that was why I need to bring that up. Jasper Tigers. It only felt right.
Yeah, me and Jordan were both getting a good education as young whippersnappers. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, the way the league is right now, like in 2003, the last time these teams met as ranked opponents, the last time, so when Auburn Mississippi State played, Mississippi State is number 15. It was the highest ranked game between the two teams. They met as ranked teams a few years ago, but weren't this highly ranked. Last time they were that highly ranked, 1959. So like, it's just, and I remember, I think it was last year, maybe 2 years ago. It was last year. Auburn and Ole Miss had never met as both ranked teams. And then they did it once, and then they did it again. Like they had never done it before, and they did it twice in the same season. It just goes to show where we're at right now in SEC basketball. I mean, shoot, look no further than, and I never thought Oklahoma was very good, but like, were they number like 12 in the country when they started league play, and now they're just 0-4. And Ole Miss, I thought maybe fraudulent warning, and still could be the case, but like they're 4-0 in the league. So you said it earlier, Jordan. Like you've winning home games is going to be a massive, massive key in this thing. It's huge. Auburn's already stolen 2 on the road. Like I don't think people realize if they go unbeaten at home and lose quite literally every road game, they will go 12-6 in the league, which is ridiculous. So got to grab some on the road. They will obviously try to do that on Saturday. Jordan Hill of Dawgs 24/7. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we will continue here on Thursday Night Live when we get back. Welcome back, everybody, here to Thursday Night Live. Appreciate Jordan once again for hopping on. Jason, I mean, Bruce said it today. We knew this in the offseason, too, when you looked at this Georgia roster. This is their best collection of players in a really long time, guys that Auburn is familiar with. Mm-hmm. He didn't mention it, but Tyron Lawrence is on this roster. That was a Vanderbilt transfer Auburn wanted. R.J. Godfrey was the transfer they wanted. And then Asa Newell, the 5-star freshman, is a guy that Auburn recruited as well. Credit to Mike White, and as Bruce said, credit to NIL investment, as has been the case for the rest of the league as well this season. This is a really, really good Georgia basketball team, and this is the first ranked versus ranked game between these teams since 2003.
Yeah, no, it's another challenge when you talk about like this league going on the road at home, no matter where it is. It's going to be a challenge, and this is an athletic Georgia team. You watched them play Kentucky the other night. I've watched them now a couple of times, and they just had a tough one against Tennessee first half. Kind of back and forth. They have a small lead, and then Tennessee just runs away to start the second half, but. You look at Georgia, I think athleticism is the first thing you look at. This is an athletic roster, and they got some length, they got some size. Now, Auburn's perimeter is better equipped to handle that than they have been in years past, but, with no Janai Broome, and Bruce Pearl said, look, he's not going to practice today, doesn't look like he'll be ready this weekend either. Without him for another game, you're going to have to go a little bit deeper, and you don't have as much size for this Auburn team. So we've seen it. Georgia gets to the free throw line, so Dylan Cardwell, Chaney Johnson, avoiding foul trouble and still being aggressive is going to be a huge part of this game.
Yeah, they did that so well. I mean, Chaney ends that game against Mississippi State with 4 fouls, but I went back and looked at it. Only 2 shooting fouls apiece for those 2 guys. They had 6 blocks total. So you'll take that ratio if you're Auburn any day of the week. It'll be interesting. I think it'll be really interesting. Me and Jordan were talking about this, Jason. Like, usually Georgia is a game that, Auburn fans travel really well because it's so close by. Again, Auburn fans travel well everywhere because of the ability to get a ticket. But he was saying, Stegman Coliseum this year has been a good home court advantage. They've sort of noticed this is a team that's becoming a team that has the potential to make the tournament. That environment on Saturday is going to be really, really interesting to me to see what kind of split they have there.
Yeah, our early game, there'll be some Auburn folks there, but it's not going to be like it has been in years past, I don't believe, where you think there's 7,000, 8,000 people and there's 2,500 Auburn fans or 3,000 Auburn fans. Now you're talking about packed house, and there might be the same amount of Auburn fans, but it's not going to feel like as many as there have been in the past because there's more Georgia fans. The students are showing up. They're going to be there, and they've got a reason to be there. Excited. At home, this is a really good basketball team at home, and that'll be the challenge for Auburn to go over there and to win on the road. Early start, like in probably the same holds way it does in football. For Auburn, you probably take that noon start to take it and see what you can do with it.
Right. So like Jason said, probably another game here without Janai Broome. It certainly sounds like Auburn is expecting to be without him, won't practice today. On Thursday, Chaney Johnson, I mean, that's a guy that you and I have been pretty high on since the offseason. He was already a really impactful player for this team before he was even in the starting lineup, but getting that opportunity to flourish in that starting group on Tuesday, 17 points for him. Jason, I keep going back to Chad Baker-Mazara, and Bruce talked about him a little bit today, how he's done a better job of maturing. I think, unfortunately for him, that became sort of a storyline people latched onto. He's obviously much more dynamic of a player than just that one thing. But you mentioned before we got rolling a hot start for Auburn. He has been that catalyst.
Correct.
I mean, I can't chart it right in front of me right now, but he had 8 points early. They
Miles Kelly.
Baker-Mazara, and then for Miles Kelly, it's been getting him those 3-point shots within the system. Baker-Mazara, when they go to Georgia last year and they were shorthanded without Jalen Williams, he was a big guy in that game. Again, I think Chad and Chaney, it's a team lineup, right? Like Auburn's strengths to numbers. I look at Chad and Chaney once again, just like the Mississippi State game.
Yeah, and I do. I think the first 5-6 minutes of this game are going to be so valuable for this Auburn team because you're still a deep team, but you're not as deep without Broome because with those 3 bigs, you had 3 guys for 2 spots. And now you think about it, and you really got 2 guys for 2 spots, and you're kind of filling holes after that. So it's impacted them in a big way. And so off to a hot start. We've seen that around the league be a catalyst for teams, whether it's home or on the road. We saw Missouri go to Gainesville the other night and get off to a hot start and had to hold on at the end. Auburn basically took Mississippi State out of that game in the first few minutes. Now, they clawed and hung around, but the start really set Auburn up for success, and I think it's going to be huge on Saturday, especially if you can keep that Georgia crowd out of the game.
Yeah, I think it was 17-9 at South Carolina. They led 17-8 at Texas. Auburn led, and then 13-2 Auburn led at Duke. And so in their true road games this season, they've done a good job of doing that. We were talking about Chaney Johnson. His matchup in this game, obviously Cam Matthews, he did a phenomenal job. Very different forward in this game, 5-star freshman. Asa Newell, a guy who projects to be a first-round pick. 6'11", but obviously moves like a big guard. Bruce Pearl said today, the best thing to stop him is to stop him from getting an offensive rebound because he is such an athletic player. On that note, Jason, I'm curious about kind of your concern level for that statistic for this team right now. They've allowed 35 offensive rebounds in their last 2 games. South Carolina, they did a really good job of adjusting. Mississippi State, they gave up 20 offensive boards, but they just shot so well. It didn't even really matter. Didn't end up being a factor. Seems like something that they've done a better job of being physical, but rebounding obviously it's a key for any team. I think that's an area the coaching staff is really keen in on right now.
And I asked Bruce about it, and he kind of leaned more towards the Miles Kelly part of my question. But saw Miles Kelly rebounded at a high rate the other day. We've seen Chad Baker-Mazara rebound at a high rate, and so you look at guys like that and how valuable that's going to be. Denver Jones, you don't have to have 3 guys get 10. But if you can have 3 or 4 get 5 or 6 and to chip in, especially the defensive rebounding side, that's been the thing. Offensive rebound, they're still doing a good job. And so can you shut down and be a defensive shutdown rebounding team? And so I think that's going to be a huge part of things. And so you look at it, we got a special guest come in here and hang out for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Come on.
I'm big for
You got the personalized jersey.
You had to back up to get him in the frame.
What's going on?
Dylan.
How you doing?
2 faves.
I mean, we're talking about obviously Saturday.
Yeah, chilling with Dylan over here.
Yeah, but for you and for this team, going on the road, we're talking about hot starts. How valuable is that from an energy standpoint, no matter where you play to get off the hot start?
That's a great question. That's a valid question, and it's really important. You saw the importance of it at Duke. It kept us in the game. Starting off 13-2. Obviously lose that game by 6, but I mean, it just gives that team confidence. It gives the away team confidence. You start out hot, and it kind of takes the crowd out of the game early.
Dylan, I wanted to ask about your scratch right there on the eyebrow. I've seen you with the bandage the last couple games.
Yeah, at the end of the game, the minute left, Tahad goes and shoots a funky layup, and it's either him or Colin Murray Boyles elbow me in the head, and I could require some stitches. And so, but I'm Auburn made, I'm not soft.
Okay, play through.
Anyways, thank y'all for y'all's time.
Come on,
sir.
Do it.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate you stepping in.
Appreciate it.
Good luck.
Good to see you, man.
See y'all.
There you go.
Showing it off.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Dylan. I mean, what we were talking about is like you look at a guy like that, but it's a perfect example of this team, though.
Sure.
Because it is a group, and I was going to ask Dylan, but like, how do you change a role when all of a sudden you go from being, okay, let's go to be the energy guy and being that guy, to now he has to go and go, look, it's almost like going from a closer to a starting pitcher in baseball, going, okay, how do I make myself the same guy but do it for 35 minutes instead of 20?
Yeah.
And that's now the challenge. And I thought from game one of that option, I thought he could not have handled it much better than he did.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, the thing with Dylan has been his offensive game has improved a lot. I think going back to last season, and like you said, the differing roles for a guy who, because Janai Broom, look, he starts at the 4, he's a center for Auburn, but the things he can do within the offense are so different than what Dylan Cardwell can do. One last thing I want to touch on with this game, Jason, Silas Demery is another talented point guard that Denver Jones is going to have to go against. This team, though, their perimeter defense continues to be something that's so impressive. I wrote about it today. It's a laundry list for Denver Jones, and Bruce said it after Mississippi State. Said, hey, why don't you guys go track down, everyone Denver Jones has guarded. I mean, it's been, I think it's 28% from the floor those guys have been. Barely more assists than turnovers, really able to limit. But again, that goes, I think it's the entire system and all those guys there on the perimeter. And you mentioned Miles Kelly. That's a guy Bruce Pearl talked about today. Again, he wanted to pivot and talk about his defense and how much he's bought into that. How many times have we heard that? Because Denver Jones came in, he was a 20 points per game scorer in Conference USA, bought in, decided to sit down and play defense, and obviously does a great job of it.
Yeah, and I think he also mentioned something that is a big part of this too. Auburn's a switching defense. They switch out, and Dylan and Chaney are such good perimeter defenders for bigger guys. They're long and athletic, and so when you start talking about guys like that, to hedge out and to keep guys from being able to get open looks and do some of those things, it becomes a really valuable part of a defensive scheme when you start talking about having those kind of guys to hedge, to help, to get out and keep from being screened, some of those things. Those guys have been a valuable part of it, but Denver is such a diligent defender, feet moving, he doesn't foul a ton, knock on wood, he's been a guy that's avoided those things. Silas Demery's a little bit longer, bigger body than maybe they've seen some in the past, and so what kind of matchup that will be, it'll be fun to watch.
Yeah, and it's certainly a lot more coming down the line throughout the SEC. Lots of talented players there that Denver Jones and this defense are going to continue to have to go after. Number 1 Auburn at number 23 Georgia on Saturday. Again, first ranked versus ranked game between these teams. We keep adding layers of history. It was the highest ranked game against Mississippi State since 1959.
Yeah.
I remember last year was the first time Auburn and Ole Miss had been ranked together ever, and then they did it twice in the same season.
A bunch of those this year before.
Yes, we're going to keep checking off a lot of those boxes. Jason, we'll kind of close out here as you look around the league. I mean, we've talked so much leading up to this season and early in the SEC slate how difficult it is to win on the road. On Tuesday, 2 top 5 teams go down at home. Alabama loses to Ole Miss and Missouri loses to Florida. Auburn picks up 2 quad 1 wins in one night. In the process, now 9-1 in quadrant 1 games. I think it goes and gives validation what Bruce Pearl said. He said a few weeks ago, it doesn't really matter whether you're home on the road. Every single team is going to come to play in this league, and that's obviously going to be the case against Georgia on Saturday and moving forward the rest of the way.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at it in Oklahoma, I've watched them now play 2 or 3 times, and Oklahoma is a talented basketball team. They're winless in this league. And they've got some good players. I mean, they got a lottery pick. And they've got another couple of guys that can play, hadn't won a game. Texas had to go to Oklahoma and win with another lottery pick and a guy, not even counting the guy that scored 30-plus against Auburn. I'm like, these are talented teams that are struggling to win a game in this league. And so every one of these you can get, you pack it up and say, hey, thanks, move on to the next one. And That's it. You just try to win in advance, and can you keep playing well? Can you keep doing those things? Yeah, that's awesome. But the ultimate goal is to try to find a way to get a victory.
Yeah, and to that point, something me and Patrick talked about after the game on Tuesday, talking about winning, advancing, moving on. Auburn's, the way the schedule plays out, you actually don't have a midweek game next week. And so I think that's really important for Johni Broome to try to come back. Will he be back for that huge game against Tennessee next Saturday? We will see. But again, just kind of another notch in that, his ability to kind of sit there and recover. Yeah, I mean, the thing is for Auburn already, I think stealing two games on the road already has been really big. Whether you can do this one on Saturday, we'll see. But if they hold serve at home, let's say, hypothetically, they were to hold serve at home in all their games and lose every road game, they'd be 12-6 in the league. And so that goes to show how important it is to kind of grab some on the road.
12-6 in the league and have a ton of quad wins.
Right, and they'd be like a 2 seed.
You're correct. And so, can you steal a couple? I mean, and it feels like even with this Auburn team, you go on the road to win. You feel like you're going to have to steal a couple, even though you're going to be favored.
Exactly.
To win on this road, you're going to have to go do something. And this team's done that. They played that way. See if they can do it again on Saturday.
Should be a great game. Didn't even mention as well that this is the 4th best defensive team on paper on Ken Palm that Auburn has faced this season. That's been a big pillar for Georgia. That's kind of been Mike White's thing. He finally has a team that's kind of putting it all together. Houston, Iowa State, and Duke are the only teams rated better on defense that Auburn has played so far.
Those have been some wars.
They have been absolute battles. So expect something similar. Hopefully we get, I thought Mississippi State was officiated really well, allowed those teams to play physical. Expect that same kind of game on Saturday in Athens. For Jason Caldwell, I'm Nathan King. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to Thursday Night Live. Thank you so much to Patrick Bingham, who's been doing some great work behind the camera for us here today, and we will catch you guys soon.